this computer. And we're live on the air from beautiful downtown Oakland, California. I love saying that. And we have another talk within the nine-sided circle. Tonight we are going to be discussing the fifth precept of the teachers of the Hwajagan, which is called Yad Kard, which translates as remembering. Now this is going to get a little bit Sufi esoteric this time around because it kind of has to. The concept of remembering, remembrance, in Arabic you say dhikr or zikr, depending on your on the dialect that you're dealing with, and it means literally to remember, remembering. It's one of the central practices of Sufis everywhere, but there are different kinds. So you have zikr of the voice, remembrance of the voice. When you think of dervish ceremonies, and you can go to YouTube and type in dervish ceremony or zikr ceremony or any of that, you can find these guys, hundreds of people sometimes in a room, and they're all moving together and they're all chanting together and they're all like focused on all of this stuff. And that's one thing. You also have what's called, they call it the silent zikr, zikri khafi, that is done internally rather than externally. So you are saying the words not out loud, but inside in your head. Let me pull up my notes on this. I have copious notes on this, none of which make any sense to anybody. So usually, I mean, traditionally, these two types of zikr are the main ones that are practiced. In Arabic, the vocal zikr is called jali. So zikr al-jali. And the silent zikr is called zikr khafi. That's actually, I'm using the Farsi pronunciation.
But this is Arabic as well.
Yes. I just noticed that I was adding what they call the ezafe, which is the I in between the words instead of the al. And that's just a force of habit. So some Sufi orders, like the vocal zikr, like the Chishti, the Qadiri, the Rifai, all of those guys, they're really into doing the really vocal chanting ceremony. Some tariqas, some orders like the Naqshbandi and the Nimatulahi, they prefer the silent zikr. And it's kind of funny because the two groups, the two differing opinions, tend to argue over which is better, which always struck me as kind of silly. And there is a third kind. Well, let me run into some of the problems with both of these. With the vocal zikr, you run the risk of being caught up in the ceremony, of being caught up in states of intoxication, emotional catharsis, all of this stuff, which is not the point. Emotional catharsis is not the point of remembering. The silent zikr can lead to a strong case of auto-hypnosis, a narrowing of attention. People get a sense of being detached when they're actually just dissociated. And some dishonest pseudo-sheikhs, as I like to call them, have used this phenomena as a form of mind control. So that's the problem with this, is that it can lead to that sort of thing. So the thing is that neither of these practices, neither the vocal zikr or the silent zikr, is what we are referring to here. There is a third kind of zikr, which is either referred to as zikr al-qalbi, which means zikr of the heart, or zikr al-dati, which means zikr of the essence. This is the practice that is referred to in the fifth aphorism. So this is also incredibly hard to describe. Let me use a metaphor. Imagine a leaf floating down an infinitely deep black well. Now, let the leaf disappear, let the well disappear, and just experience the floating. That's kind of what we're talking about. This is the experience of the remembrance without words. It's not pre-verbal, it's more post-verbal. So they say zikr is for remembering God. Remember what you're remembering is God. But this is also a misnomer, because even to say it that way treats God as the other. Treats the experience of the real as other than you. So you're remembering something. This is not what this is talking about. This is the experience of reality, remembering the experience of reality. Does that even remotely make sense, or am I sounding like a drunkard at this point? I hear somebody typing somewhere. And it's not Kyle, so.
Nope. Oh, okay.
Okay.
David says it makes sense.
Good.
Nancy says it's clear. It's an immanent model instead of transcendent.
You said a mouthful, Nancy, but you said it correctly.
Good job.
Like a good Sufi, I am wired on caffeine.
We had to fuel up.
We had to fuel up. So, how do you experience this? You might well ask. How do you do this practice? And the answer is, it's incredibly hard to do on your own. Traditionally, the way this practice is done is that it is passed from teacher to student to teacher to student. It's like a meme. It's like an idea that is it's like getting the flu, only with God. How's that for a metaphor? So you may ask how the first person got it, and the answer is, I don't know. I know how the stories go. The stories usually go, Khidr came down and taught me the zikr.
Aaron asks, like
Yes.
learning to read, you can't unlearn it.
Yes, you can't unlearn it. And you have to have somebody somewhere along the line tell you what those shapes mean. You know, without something that points to the shapes, they don't mean anything. So even if you only have pictures, you can figure out some reading. But the best reading is when somebody is sitting there teaching you, so going, that word is fabulous. What does fabulous mean? You know, to really inculcate the language into a set of digital symbols.
Nancy says someone had to invent writing.
Yes, somebody had to invent writing. Somebody had to invent remembering. This process came from somewhere. I'm pretty sure it wasn't space aliens. I kind of like the Khidr theory myself because it actually makes sense in comparison to everything else. So there was some form of grace that gave to somebody the infection of Zikr. Doesn't sound quite poetic. But so you guys have all heard me talk about entrainment over and over again. Mm-hmm. The secret of passing this down is entrainment within a group. If I know how to do this, and Kyle wants to know how to do this, Kyle and I sit, and I do it in such a way that she entrains with me, and she begins to do it too. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like magic or anything. Not really. But this is one of the purposes, at least in this particular path, of being taught, is that some of the knowledge is infectious.
Ahmed says, another theory is that Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught it to Abu Bakr in the cave, and he was transferred to Salman al-Farsi.
Yep, that's a theory, but then who taught it to the Prophet? And one might say the Archangel Gabriel. Jibril taught it to the Prophet. And who else, what else is Jibril known by oftentimes? There are a lot of theories that Jibril and Khidr are the same being. So, yeah, however it starts, it starts with the divine unity, with the one, and moves downward from that.
Aaron says, can you elaborate on the Khidr story?
The Khidr theory, yeah. So there is this figure that appears throughout history, who is known as Khidr, called the Green One, and he is often connected both with Elijah and with the Archangel Gabriel. Maybe not. All of that is way above my pay grade. But he shows up like he was the teacher of Moses. And he shows up in the lives of various Sufis, like Ibn al-Arabi had a visitation from him and learned a bunch of stuff. And yeah, some of the great Sufi teachers in history have had encounters with this person or this being. And what he seems to be sort of a messenger. And he comes and he initiates people and teaches people and that sort of thing. That's the story. Whether or not you want to believe it, I don't know. I've experienced enough that I think that Khidr is more near-fetched than people realize. But that's just me. Take it with a grain of salt. Realize that we're talking about a phenomena that has no scientific explanation per se. And it might just be good story. It doesn't matter as long as you understand. If you think it's a story, take it as a metaphor. If you think that it is more than a story, take it as more than a story. I personally tend to lean a little bit towards the more than a story sort of thing, but I've run across some weird things in my life, so there is that. But since I can't invite Hitter to come in and get on the mic with me, well, I could, but I think he's probably busy. But if Kyle's eyes turn green all of a sudden, so that's the basic story of Hitter.
I'll let you know if he shows up.
Yeah. So we have this idea of remembrance, and this remembrance is remembrance at a level below or beyond or above linguistic linguistic symbolizing.
Okay.
Okay. Did Hitter show up?
No. Nancy's asked a question.
Okay, lay it on me.
I'm trying the remove leaf, remove well thing. It seems to be good for me, but it might just be some sort of good kinesthetic imagining.
Okay, so what's the question?
If you want to go on the mic, that's cool too.
Yeah, you don't have to type.
Whatever's easier for you.
Okay, well, I don't know. What am I doing? Is it anything like what's intended?
I'm not inside your head, so it's kind of hard to say, but it sounds like it is. Mm-hmm. Which is amusing because that particular metaphor I got from a science fiction novel. From a novel called The Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny, and I thought that it was the most perfect description of this experience I had ever run across. So I stole it from it.
Too long since I've read it.
Yeah. So I would say that it's at least the start of what we're talking about, because what we want out of remembering is, what is it that you're remembering? You're not remembering something else. You're not remembering your connection to something else. You are remembering the one. And it's called the one because that's all there is of it. And right now, if we were able to all be in that particular state, this state that I'm referring to, the one would be looking out of all of our eyes. I think Ahmed was the one who quoted a little while ago about the I am the eyes through which he sees and the ears through which he hears, and that sort of thing. And that's the state, and this is what Arabi talked about over and over and over again, the unity of being, the unity, the oneness of everything. And this is the act of remembering that is spoken of here. And it is a unique experience amongst all of the experiences that you could have. And as far as I can tell, everybody is capable of having it. It is easiest to have it with a little help.
Ilmar asks, so essentially a falling away of whatever we are using individuation? Whatever we are using
for individuation, yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Not exactly, because the individual doesn't really go away. It is more a sense of, where are you looking? Where is your attention? So if my philosophy professor is right, we are both individual and universal at the same time. And we are capable of experiencing both of those phenomena as a unity, as a whole. And this is sort of closer to what I'm talking about. Individual does not go away. One just disidentifies with the contents of individuality for a bit. That might be the way to say it. Does that make sense? Good.
Thumbs up.
Yay. God, I love it when I can actually make sense for a change. Pull up my notes here and see what I'm missing. So, remembrance of essence. That's what Zikri Dati or Zikri Zati means, essence. And there is only one essence. There can't be more than one essence. If there's more than one, it's not the essence. So, I could give you the techniques for doing this, and you could do the techniques. And without that extra little oomph, it might never work. You need the oomph. And how to go into that is probably a little bit beyond the scope of this particular kind of talk. But what am I? Okay, y'all know what sourdough bread is, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody here not know what sourdough bread is? Good. So you know how you make sourdough bread. It's different than making regular bread where you pour a packet of yeast into the flour. To make sourdough bread, you need what's called the starter. The starter is a mass of dough that is kept in a jar, usually in your fridge, and is literally fed more flour from time to time so that it can stay alive. Some sourdough starters have been handed down from generation to generation for 100 years or more. And then when you want to make bread, you just pull off a chunk of this and you mix it in with the flour, and all of the yeasts and bacterias that exist in that starter permeate the bread, and you get bread that has a very particular taste that is extremely delicious, especially toasted with lots of butter. But the starter is always there. It catalyzes the bread in a certain way. It gives of itself so that the bread can become leavened. And yet it continues. And that starter can be split up into many pieces and given to a lot more people who then feed it themselves and then use it to leaven other bread. And there may be a strain of the original sourdough starter somewhere in the world that is directly connected all the way back to the first loaf of sourdough bread that was ever baked, probably 6,000 years ago. Now there's a thought. And just like that, this quality of initiating the remembrance in people is passed down in the same way and passed from person to person. And you don't have to be super special in order to do it. You just have to get out of your own way. So, this is the quality of remembrance. Now, we run into a problem with this. And the problem with this is people thinking that they can do it all themselves. In my original notes, I'm pulling some of this from notes for a class that I did back in the early 90s on the subject. So the first thing you get is, I don't need a guide. And they always bring up Uwais Qarani, who was a Sufi who lived at the time of the Prophet and who never met the Prophet, but who became initiated into his path and became one of the very first Sufi devotees. They say his mother was sick and he couldn't leave her or something along those lines. So he lived in Yemen, could never make it up to Mecca, but nevertheless was a companion of the Prophet for all of his life. And so people talk about, oh, you know, if he did it on his own, I can do it on my own. First of all, he didn't do it on his own. According to tradition, he was initiated by that green guy again. But that's always a thing. So you get, I can do it all on my own. Uwais Qarani did. All I have to do is read the right books and listen to my inner guidance, and I will be the master without anyone telling me what to do. And that's a nice thought. And it might work. I'm not saying that you couldn't do it this way. What I am saying is you probably won't. Because one of the uses of guidance on the path is because of the fact that nobody can lie to you like you. If you want somebody to fool you, all you have to do is look in the mirror. Right? That's the guy who's going to fool you. Dave carries around the joker who plays tricks on him all the time. So do I. So does Kyle. And it helps to have the outside feedback that says, you know, you may think you're onto something, but actually you're full of it.
Yep.
I'm quoting my teacher to me, almost word for word. And this is an important part of the tradition. It is not a master-disciple relationship. People mistake it for that as well. It is a relationship of somebody who can be hold a clear space while you regurgitate your crap and then point out to you that it's crap. And without that, it is very difficult to continue on the path.
Because if you don't break those bad habits, I mean, they might not even be bad habits, but they get in your way.
Yep.
And that trips you up. You may not even realize it's tripping you up. You may be convincing yourself that you're not having an issue.
Preach.
Seen it too many times in myself and others.
Yeah. So I have a quote here in my notes from Muhammad Shafi. He says, the Sufis feel that maturity cannot be achieved alone. They feel that there is a need for guidance and discipline. The path is unknown, the night is dark, and the road is full of danger. Dangers include preoccupation with selfishness, false visions, misinterpretation of mystical states, arrested development, fixation in a particular state. Notice that one in particular. Appeal to various drugs to create false mystical experiences, and not infrequently overwhelming anxiety and insanity. Whew. So, that is what this particular aphorism refers to, the state that you need to get into, and the preferred method of getting into it that requires the least amount of banging one's head on the wall in frustration. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Nuts. And feel free to say no.
Yep. If it doesn't make sense, I will tell it in a different way, or I will get the dog to tell it because he is here. And remember, dog spelled backwards is God, but Bob spelled backwards is still Bob.
Okay. Ahmed asks, how can a person find his sheikh/guide?
That is a very good question. And the answer is to look really, really hard, and you won't find him. Let me tell you how I found my first teacher. So here I am. I am young. I have figured out that the Sufi path is the path that I need to follow. So I figure I must go to the Middle East. I must go far away from my home because wisdom is only found in far lands. So I save up money. I take off. I travel to Morocco, to Egypt, to Lebanon, to Jordan, to Iran. And everywhere I go, I find Sufis and I hang out with them. And my teacher is not there. He is nowhere to be found. There, I found incredibly good people. I found wise teachers. I found people who I know had achieved profound states of enlightenment, but they weren't the right one. So I did this for some time. And after the money went out, I said, I guess this is not what I'm meant to do or something. And I went home to Santa Cruz, California. So after I go home, I go down to Bookshop Santa Cruz, which was one of my favorite hangouts. And behind the bookshop at that time, there was a cafe called Pergolices, which served the best coffee in town. And I picked up the free newspaper, which is called The Good Times. That's been circulated through Santa Cruz for decades, maybe millennia, who knows. The grizzly bears might have read it before white people ever showed up there. And anyway, I'm reading through it and seeing what's going on. And I turn to the back page, to the classifieds. And there, in the classifieds, is a little ad that says, Sufi teacher is in area for 1 week and accepting interviews, with a phone number. And I look at it and I went, okay. And I call him up and I say, yeah, I'd like to have an interview. And they set up a time. He is staying in a house exactly 1 mile from mine on the same road. I mean, literally on Alba Road, which runs from Ben Lomond, which is in the Santa Cruz Mountains, to Bonnie Doon, which is on the top of the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I lived halfway up it, and this house was like a quarter of the way up it. And I go there, and there's my teacher, literally in my backyard. And so I took initiation with him on the spot and was with him until the day he died. So that's how I found mine. And there is no knowing how you will find your teacher except that it will speak to you in a certain way. They say that when you are in the presence of a true teacher, there are certain things that you'll notice. One is that you'll feel good because he'll lift your burden for a while. He'll take a little of your burden on him. He will speak the things that are in your heart. And that he will never point to himself. He will only point to the divine unity. He will point to the one. So those are 3 ways you can know if a teacher is the real deal. And then if it's your teacher, maybe you'll know, maybe you won't. I've had people who met their teacher 5 or 6 times before they were ready to realize that, yeah, it's that person there. And oftentimes they will not look like you expect them to look.
Mark says, sounds like our guide is looking for us as much or more as we are looking for the guide.
That is absolutely the case. As a matter of fact, if you go into the notes in the Nine-Sided Circle Forum, you will find an essay that I wrote on that very subject. When the teacher is ready, the student will appear. It's a saying that goes when it goes along with the student is ready. It goes both ways. So, Ahmed, I realized that I did not entirely answer your question, but that's like the best I can come up with.
I have a thought that unless you've taken this journey that you traveled all over the place to find him, you wouldn't have found him very close to you. I mean, you've done your part, but the result is not yours. So yeah.
I suspected it was partly because I did my part, and partly because God likes practical jokes.
Perhaps.
Yeah, but I found it really funny. I think I laughed for half an hour after I figured out what was going on. People looked at me like, oh, he is either crazy or he's in some state. But it was actually just, I got the joke. But yeah, the journey is important. And people say that. They say, you cannot find what you are looking for by looking for it, but you will not find it unless you look for it. Which doesn't make a lot of sense until you find it, and then you understand what that means. So, the process of remembrance, and in this case, the real remembrance, which is the remembrance that transcends verbal symbolism. We don't need verbal symbol systems, but it is hard to conceive of any sort of communication without them. So does that sort of kind of a little bit make sense? Good. Ask me questions. I have tons of answers. All I need is a question to go with them.
And you don't have to type it up if you don't want to. All right. Aaron says, makes sense. So.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
I found out that some students or followers who are following a certain Sufi order, they are very, very careful when they take their instructions, their dhikr, their awrad from their teacher, and they make sure that they don't mix or they take or they practice other awrad from a different school or different teacher or something like this. They find it's very dangerous or it's conflicting. Why is this? I mean, it's.
I know that some people do that, but I also know that in real schools. So, my teacher sent me first to the Mevlevis, then to the Qadiris, then to the Chishtis to learn different things. And this was his instruction. This was not just, oh, go out and learn cool stuff. This was, I want you to go and as part of your work, spend 2.5 years with this Mevlevi Sheikh, who's a friend of mine, who is going to teach you these things. And so I did. So I think that sometimes when you get this thing of we don't want you to do any practices but our practices, that can be for a number of different things. One is maybe they're kind of empty. Maybe they have the form without the essence, and they don't want anybody to know because they'll lose all of their people. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that they're dealing with somebody who is so flighty, they're always off to the next thing, and they're trying to get them to focus on something long enough to actually get it done. And I think, yes, some people can benefit from doing one practice exclusively. There is no doubt about that. And some people need different kinds of experiences. The thing with a true teacher is that they will arrange for every individual student to have the experiences that they need, and no two teachings will look the same. I mean, right now I have two of my core students sitting, well, three. I don't see Nick, but he's around here somewhere. We have Mark, we have Kyle, we have Nick. I work with all of them completely differently. If you were to like examine the way we work from the outside, you would think that I was teaching three different paths. And I'm not. I'm teaching one path, trying to design the methods that will work for each individual, because Kyle and Mark are not the same person. And so if they're not the same person, they can't learn exactly the same way, and they can't learn exactly the same materials. They need to learn the materials that work for them, if that makes sense. So that's another sign of what I consider a true guide, is that they craft the path for the student to their individual needs rather than to some established practice in a book or something that somebody told them that they had to do it this way, because the path is not one size fits all.
So Mustafa,
yes,
let's dig a bit into that. I mean, what is it that I don't want to say needs to be taught, but I mean, I see at least two different things, right? One is the calling of bullshit, right? Where the other is this transmission of essence, right? But then what you're talking about now is almost like learning aspects of something which constitute your particular path to the recognition of essence. I mean,
no, it's more like, what do you need to break down in yourself in order to experience that which is beyond your commanding self, beyond your ego?
So are you saying then that until that's done, this transmission of essence via the remembrance process won't bite?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that needs to be done for you to complete the path. The transmission of the zikr is like the planting of a seed.
Okay.
But this is like, so on my screen right now are you and Nancy. If I was teaching you, if I tried to teach Nancy, if I tried to have a talk with her the way that you and I talk, she would be, one, really upset. She would probably get really angry with me, and she would stop listening.
Okay.
If I tried to speak to you like I would speak to Nancy, I would get the same effect. Because you're two different people in two different states with two different fixations. And each of you needs to be treated as individual, not as, like I like to say, not as a one-size-fits-all path.
And to what end is the treatment? Is the treatment to make you, it sounds like part of it is to make you palatable, so to speak, to the transmission of essence. But part of it seems to be also to how you grow up as a full person.
It's part of both of those, and it is to apply effectively what we call the second conscious shock, the shock that wakes you up. And that's sort of like the effect that you get on a Zen koan, except that I don't get to hit you with a stick. The Zen guys,
you wish you would, right?
yeah, the Zen guys, somehow they got the better end of that deal. They get to hit their students with sticks. Sufis do not get to hit their students with sticks for whatever reason. But it's that what you are delivering is that koan-like shock to the self that wakes them up.
And wakes them up from their fixations, from their identifications?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Their fixations, their identifications, their conditioning.
Okay.
And this goes back to...
Yeah, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah, Nick says that I've hit him with swords. Yes, I have in fact hit Nick with swords, but he needed it. And in all fairness, he got better.
And is this shock, this loosening up from the fixation identification, is that a precondition for experiencing this recognition of essence? Or my unity?
Kind of. If you are completely locked into your fixation, you can't see anything else.
Okay.
Anything that you're fixated on is pulling all of your attention.
Okay. All right.
So I have to get your attention off of that.
Okay.
And, like I said, each person is different. You and I, when we talk, it's like we're having Zen combat sometimes.
But not with swords. Hopefully.
Yeah, without the swords, but in the same way that two Zen masters sit down and they have these wild discussions to bring forth a point. And that's something I can do with you. And you know how to absorb that and take it in. Most people I can't do that with because it would hurt their feelings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. I guess. I guess part of what I'm looking at is, there are some traditions which said, hey, once you understand that you're it, that there is just this oneness and you're it, and that everything else is bullshit. Why bother with it? And clearly that obviously doesn't work for me. But it doesn't work for most people, I suspect.
Yeah, and it doesn't last. And Mark asked a question there that I just barely caught.
We
two
had,
questions.
A few questions, but I wanted you guys to get the chance to wrap up that dialogue.
Yeah. So if we need to, we'll come back to this, but let's catch the other questions before it gets too late.
Let's do that. We want to make sure everyone gets their time. Nick asks, would you say contemplative movement is a form of remembering?
I would say that it can be. Not that it is, but that it can be.
Okay. Aaron asked, what is the name for the walking sticks you've mentioned?
We call them sticks. Sorry, but...
Okay, and Mark asked, he said the teacher manipulates, yes? Yes,
the teacher manipulates. Manipulation has gotten a bad rap, but you have to move somebody into the right state. And that is in fact a form of very conscious manipulation. So to get back to Aaron's question real quick, this is the stick, right?
Don't hit me.
I won't hit you. In English, we call it a stick. In Turkish, it's called lobut. Ahmed will tell you what it's called in Arabic. In Egypt.
Nabut.
Lobut.
Nabut, it calls Nabut. They use it in tahtib that you've mentioned on one of the talks. Yes.
Yeah, so there's just a little consonantal shift between the Arabic and the Turkish. And all of the words mean stick. This is my stick. Maybe it's not the best stick, but it's my stick. I like it. And usually they're about 4 feet long, somewhat longer, somewhat shorter for some people. My stick is 4 feet. Kyle's stick would be probably 3 feet because Kyle is a bit smaller than me.
Where's my stick?
Where is your stick? We may have to get you a stick. So, other questions that came up?
Okay, we just have a new one
Yeah.
from Dave. When a group of individuals all resonate in this one essence, does it amplify and or produce an emergent phenomenon
Yes.
to occur?
Yes.
Produce emergent phenomena. I'm
Yeah.
hearing an echo, so that's why I keep talking kind of stiltedly.
And Ilmar asked, what is the stick used for? It's used
Yeah.
for a couple of things. One is exercise, and the other is support. Exercise and support. So there are a number of exercises that you do with the stick that develop coordination, balance, strength, agility, all of these things, and put you in a conscious flow state. The use of the stick is designed to create flow state. And if you ever go, you can go to YouTube and look up Tatib and watch some of the fights. They aren't really fights. They're fights, but they aren't fights. Because what the players are doing is getting into this state where they can, they're almost prescient about what the other person is doing. Yes, like capoeira, very much the same idea of the game, of the rota.
Okay. Any more questions?
Any more questions?
Yes.
Yes.
If God is present in everything, how can God be ignored? Which seems to be what people mostly do.
God is not present in everything. Everything is present in God. That's what a Sufi would say.
Okay.
Yes.
Whether you're aware of that
Yeah.
is another thing.
So the thing about remembrance, in the Quran, you have a lot of references to this. And it's like, if you remember God, God will remember you. God remembers you even if you don't remember him or her. The way I experience it is at every moment, the reality is remembering the entire universe. And if it ever stopped doing that, there would be no more universe. That's my own personal experience of it. It could that could be totally weird to anybody else, but that's how I get it.
Ilmar says, repeat that.
Which part? In my experience, at every instant, nonstop, the divine unity, the real, is remembering the entire universe. Everything in it, down to the last atom of hydrogen, up to the biggest star, every tiny bit is within that remembrance. And if that ever stopped remembering the universe, there would be no universe. It would cease to exist because it exists only through that action of remembrance. And this remembrance is a mirror of that. When we talk about Yad Kard, we're talking about a mirror of that remembrance where literally the truth is holding the universe in existence through its attention, through its remembrance, and we reflect that back.
Would you say it's like plugging into?
Yeah, it's like
that?
plugging into that, because that has to be going on at every single instant, or the universe ceases to exist.
So this is not the sort of Berkeley type idealism where an object exists only insofar as an object of consciousness in, in God, for Berkeley in God's sensorium. This is more like the universe remembering its own essence.
Kinda. Or, yeah, it's anything that I would say about this at this point, I'm going to be lying to you, because it's so, the verbalization is so far from the experience that it doesn't feel like I'm telling the truth.
Mm.
All right.
Yeah, or the Tao that can be spoken of is not the Tao. It's that damn Lao Tzu. I shake my fist at him.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions?
Or thoughts.
Or thoughts? Or answers? Remember, I'm not the only one who knows something here.
Ahmed is something.
Yes.
The different Sufi orders, the different Sufi schools, do they have different perspectives or regarding the conception of God, but they are different in the way, or?
This is the way I understand the different Sufi schools. It's like some people are really good at mechanics. And so they might go to a school that teaches you auto mechanics. Other people are really good at weaving. And so they might go to a weaver school. You go to the school that most speaks to your talents. So, like with the Chishtis, for instance, in India, they draw musicians. Musicians love the Chishtis, and the Chishtis love musicians, and they produce beautiful music. All the Qawwali singers out there are Chishtis, and that sort of thing. There are Sufis I know in Morocco who they all make perfume, and not just like the crap that you buy in stores. They extract the essences from flowers and distill them and do it in the old traditional Islamic way. So they never use alcohol or any of that kind of stuff, and it makes some of the best essential oils that you will ever get under your nose. And they've been doing that for hundreds of years. Some Sufi orders are all about healing. And so they produce really good healers, doctors, medical people, spiritual healers, the whole 9 yards. And they do traditional stuff like that. You have like the Bektashi. The Bektashi, the people who become Bektashis are incredibly into social justice. The Bektashis have been striving for social justice for 900 years, and they do it the old-fashioned way of going out and working in the trenches. So it is not a matter of having different conceptions. It's not a matter of one group having this truth and this other group has this truth. It's a matter of where are your natural proclivities? Where are your skills? Where are your interests? And that's the group, that's the tariqa that you end up getting drawn to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is not like the Christians where every day they have a new sect. Yeah. Oh, new Protestant sect. New, improved, Jesus, yay. It ain't that.
And so is it what's in common between all those? The development or the getting mastery of a particular external art? Because I mean, whether you're a weaver,
getting mastery of an external art is part of the path in some ways.
It doesn't matter which particular external art.
Yeah, it's like what you want is to be able to go Zen on something.
It's about the dedication.
Yeah. And but there, I outlined 7 rules that I have discovered. My teacher gave me this task of figuring out why, what was it that we lost that used to make the old sheikhs incredibly healthy and live very, very long times and be able to practice. And one of the things is to have a craft that engages your fine motor skills. That seems to be essential to the path. And the old tariqas used to do that. You don't see that very much anymore, I'm sad to say, in most places. The founder of my order was a carver. He's a wood carver, and he spent his entire life doing that. He supported himself by the work of his own hands by carving spoons and such things and selling them in the marketplace. And by all accounts, he carved beautiful spoons. Not everybody can say that.
Nancy asks, what are the other 6 rules?
That is going to be an entire different talk, because it's going to take an hour for each rule. But I will go over them briefly. Breathing. Breathing is very important. If you don't think so, hold your breath for 5 minutes. Fasting. Our way is the way of breath practice and fasting. Physical exercise that involves both endurance and resistance. Whole body physical exercise to the best of your ability. A craft that brings in your fine motor skills. Diet that includes certain foods and excludes certain foods, and is very much to do with portion. That's 6, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then the 7th is community. Being in community makes you healthier. So those 7 things together constitute the essence of what made the old masters live for very, very long time, kept them very, very healthy, and kept them awake, as far as I can tell. There may be other things, but I haven't found them yet. But I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that these 7 things will extend your life. And I could be wrong. I'll let you know in another 50 years.
Well, I mean, I can say that my life has improved since I've incorporated a lot of these things into my life.
Yeah, that's my experience too. And when I say craft, that includes things like martial art. Exercise is also included in that. If they meet the proper criteria. Full body exercise that includes resistance and endurance and fine motor skills. So there's a lot of ways to get there.
And that's very much about, you know, the needs of your body and
yeah. What I do will not be the same as what Kyle does. What Kyle does will not be the same as what Mark does. What Mark does will not be the same as what Nick does.
Yeah, I'd say it's about building around the needs of your body and what you need to learn from the experiences, right?
Yeah.
What your goals are.
But breath mastery is the first step, which is why that's the one thing I work with everybody. You come and talk to me and do a private session with me. The first thing I'm going to do is say, I'm going to teach you how I want you to breathe. And it's going to go from there. And I'm going to give you a breath practice. And I will refine that practice over time. And it all starts out with the one basic, and then it diverges off according to the needs of the individual person. Other thoughts and questions? Come on, I know there's another question out there somewhere. Dave, talk to me.
Hello.
Hi.
I don't have a question so much because a lot of as often happens with these talks, a lot of information I've been considering myself just comes out in the course of the discourse anyhow. But
I love it when that happens.
Yeah, the group aspect of remembering is something I've been, I guess you would say, interested in researching for a while, and particularly in physical circumstances, because sometimes people will pop into a remembering state, and if there's no one around to mirror it, they go back and they had a nice class. But if the teacher catches it, you can draw it out and create quite an interesting anchoring for the person, at least in my experience. Sound correct?
Yeah, sounds right to me. Aaron, who introduce us to your friend?
I was going to say, who's your friend?
Yeah, who's your friend? Hello, Maria.
Hi. She says hello. Thank you. Hi.
Yeah, it caught me by surprise for a moment there. I looked up to where your picture is and I went, damn, Aaron looks a lot better than I've ever seen him.
All right.
So.
Okay, well, let me ask one more question then.
All right.
You talked about community as being one of the, I only see 6 of them, but as a 7 of those 7 factors. To what extent is intimate relationship?
Sorry, what's that?
Something either as
You're breaking up there a little bit.
It's because we need to mute somebody. Stop.
I think you may have got it. So say again, Ilmar.
What I'm asking is, to what extent is intimate relationship, in addition to just community, where we have obviously very strong relationships with people in the community, but there's also often like special relationships. A man, woman, wife, husband relationships are an example of it, or father-child relationships are an example. Are these sort of intimate relationships? It seems to me, at least, that I learn a lot from those.
Yeah, I consider that to be part of community.
Okay.
All right, Nick, take care. We will talk to you soon. Yeah, I consider intimate relationships to be part of the community experience.
So without that, would you not have a complete community?
I think that it's important. I think I think that having a whole life is important. I think that some people can be a little bit detached from that, and it doesn't hurt them. But I think that we're getting another echo somewhere.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for the most part, it is an essential part of community. The experience of having a partner, of having children, of raising them, of them raising you. All of these things can be a very important part of the path and part of the part of community. The difference may be that in the kind of community that I'm talking about, you're not isolated as a couple or a family, but you've created a kind of extended family. I'll give you one example. I was in Australia, in Melbourne, with a group of Sufis, and they are all what they call Cape Malay, which are a group of actually Indonesians that were basically kidnapped and enslaved by the Dutch and first taken to South Africa, and a bunch of them immigrated from South Africa to Australia, and now they have a big community there. And a lot of them are Sufis, and I was sent by my teacher with another person to spend a month in Melbourne working with these folks and giving them instruction. And I remember at a social gathering, it's sort of a meet and greet thing. This man and his wife walked in, and he was carrying his son, and he looked around and he walked up to me, and he handed me his kid and said, Ahmed, I want you to meet your uncle. And it's like, and he totally meant it. It was like, this is part of your family. And that greater sense of family is part of the community that we often lack, that is essential to human health and survival, I think.
So at least in the Sufi tradition, the monastic tradition doesn't seem like much
no, as a matter of fact, the Prophet was extremely clear on this. He said, there is no monkery in Islam. The idea of being celibate and isolating yourself and going off and living in a monastery your entire life is anathema. Sufi conclaves exist so that people can do retreats for a certain specific amount of time and then go back into the world. But it is from the beginning very much a in the world process. No running away from it. No hiding in a monastery. You might retire to a monastery. But.
Yet, of course, in some traditions, it seems like the monastic path has worked for some people, right?
Yeah,
or maybe
it could
hasn't
be.
worked completely. Is that?
I could say that it has undoubtedly worked for some people. It's just this is not that path.
Right. So, is there something special about the Sufi path which uses this sense of intimate relationship and community?
I don't know if special. Again, it goes back to what techniques work for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's not that we have some better truth. Of course, we have some better truth than everybody else. But that goes without saying. But
otherwise, we wouldn't be listening to you, right? Of course.
That's right. But it's not that we have something better. We have something that speaks to certain people.
Gotcha.
And I got to say that every valid path has produced awakened beings. There is not one that hasn't that I know of. I mean, if they didn't, the path wouldn't exist.
You know, it's a tautology, right? If it's a valid path that produces awakened beings, otherwise it's not a valid path, right?
Yeah. I mean, So I can't say that this way is better, that way is better. All I can say is the way that I have gone about it, or the way that I was taught, is the one that worked for me.
Gotcha.
And it will work for certain other people.
Gotcha.
Aaron says, so far it seems like a well-structured model, and I'm finding use in it.
Good. That's what we're looking for, is people who can find use in this, because if you don't find use in it, I am wasting my breath.
Yeah, I mean, you can always go elsewhere if that's the case. So
Yeah. But I do this for the people who find value in it. So Aaron is one of my people, because he's finding value in what we're doing. So I like that. We're almost up to 8:30, so I am going to call an end to the formal part of this and say thank you to you all. And as always, I appreciate each and every one of you coming and talking with me and helping me explain this stuff, because without you, I would not be anywhere near as clear.
thanks, everyone.
And so we're going off the air.